What are the tests carried out on piles and the solution if the piles fail the test? Pile foundation is the most reliable foundation in a scenario where an adequate soil bearing capacity is not found at a surface relatively close or near the natural ground level. That is a scenario where a deep foundation is required. Also, when the surface to construct on is submerged in water, pile foundation is the most suitable foundation. Just like other structural elements, a pile foundation is tested for tensile and compressive strength. You take the reinforcements to the laboratory to test for the tensile strength, while you take a sample cube to the laboratory to test for the compressive strength. But these two tests are taken during the construction of a pile. But our main concern is the test we take after the construction of a pile. And these tests are 3 in number. 1. We have the static pile load test, we have the dynamic pile load test, and we have the pile integrity test. Normally, this test should be done after 28 days of casting the pile, because this is when the ultimate strength of the pile will be attained. For the static pile load test, the static pile load test is carried out to determine the bearing load capacity of a pile. We want to test how much load the pile can bear. There are 3 approaches of testing the bearing load capacity of a pile using a static pile load test. 1. We have the static pile load test in respect to the upward uplift. We have the static pile load test in respect to the downward settlement. And we have the static pile load test in respect to the lateral displacement. Normally, a design load would have been used to structurally design the piles. So when we want to statically test the piles, we use a load between 150% and 200% of the design load. That is, a safety factor between 1.5 and 2.0 be multiplied with the design load. When you want to carry out the static pile load test in respect to the upward uplift, there will be a backup hydraulic jack that will try to lift out or draw out the pile. For example, if the design load of a single pile is 60 kN, a load between 90 kN and 120 kN will be applied to lift up the pile, and the vertical deflection or uplift will be read using 2 or 4 dia gauges. The readings taken on the dia gauges will be manually recorded at an interval of 15 minutes or 30 minutes. This record will then be used to analyze the test to determine if the pile passes or fails. Some companies use a hand-driven hydraulic jack to load the pile. The load used for this test is usually done incrementally. That is, if you want to use a 100 kN load, for example, you will start from a 0 kN to 20 kN to 50 kN to 80 kN, then to 100 kN, or any way you wish to increase the load. Just do it incrementally. The second one is the static pile load test in respect to the downward deflection. To carry out a static pile load test in respect to the downward deflection, that is settlement, the pile cap of the pile may firstly be constructed so as to have a wide and firm surface area to load the pile. A safety factor between 1.5 and 2.0 will be multiplied with the design load to obtain the testing load. In this case, we don't pull the pile outward, we push it inward. This is how to carry out the test. An hydraulic jack will be placed on the pile, and then we will now load the hydraulic jack with the testing load, which will be between 150% and 200% of the design load. The vertical settlement will be measured by the dia gauges, and the values obtained will be manually recorded on a paper in 15 minutes or 30 minutes interval. This value will then be used to analyze the result to determine if the pile fails or passes. It will take 24 hours to complete this test. You just keep taking the readings at 15 minutes, 15 minutes, 15 minutes interval until the 24 hours clocks. Some companies even continue until 26 hours to complete this test. The third one is the static pile load test in respect to the lateral displacement. To carry out the static pile load test in respect to the lateral displacement, the most employed method to do this is to place a jack in between 2 piles and as the jack is loaded to expand, the two piles will be pushing each other laterally. And of course, a dial gauge will be connected to the pile to take the readings with respect to time, as usual. The number 2 test is the dynamic pile load test. Dynamic pile load test is another approach to determine the load bearing capacity of a pile, just like the static pile load test. But it is a faster and easier approach, but the result of static pile load test is more precise than the dynamic pile load test. When you want to carry out a dynamic pile load test, 2 pairs of sensors are attached to 2 opposite sides of the pile. One sensor is a strain transducer and the other is an accelerometer. That is, one strain transducer and one accelerometer will be placed at one side of the pile. Another strain transducer and one more accelerometer will be placed at the other side of the pile, making 4 sensors. So 2 pairs of sensors. The strain transducer will measure the strain of the pile, while the accelerometer will measure the vibration. The 4 sensors at the 2 opposite sides of the pile are linked to a data logger, which can be connected to your PC or your tab. Now, an impact load between 150% to 200% of the design load will be incrementally released on the pile. The sensors will now take the measurement of the strain and vibration and generate it as a graph that will be displayed on the engineer's or the tester's PC. This output will then be analyzed to determine if the pile passes or fails the load bearing test. Number 3 is the pile integrity test. Pile integrity test is a test carried out on pile to determine in detail the size, length, and location of any damages in the pile. When casting the pile, there may be some areas of the pile that are not covered by concrete. There may be void within the pile during installation. We can have defects like necking, cracking, or budging that may be within the pile, which we cannot physically see because the pile is installed inside the ground. Only the pile head will be seen at the top. So you need to verify the integrity of a pile before we can construct the superstructure on it. So what we mean by integrity is there no crack? Is there no bulging? Is there no necking? Is there no void in it? That's what we mean by integrity. So to now test if this integrity of the pile is intact, we need to take a pile integrity test. When you want to carry out a pile integrity test, you will place a motion transducer on the pile head. You may apply a Vaseline under the transducer so that it can firmly stick to the pile head. The transducer will then be connected to a tablet that will display the output of the test. A heavy hammer is used to hit the pile head very gently, and the transducer will then generate the impact of the hammer as a wave on the tab. So you will keep hitting the pile as many times as possible to keep generating the wave, The graph will then be analyzed on the tab and a report will be generated. You can then know if your pile passes or fails the test. Doing a pile integrity test, you can test, analyze, and generate your reports on the same day. In summary, the static pile load test and the dynamic pile load test are used to determine the load bearing capacity of the pile, but the pile integrity test is used to determine the integrity of the pile. You know what integrity means. The pile integrity test, the dynamic test, and the static test, the 3 of them, they are non-destructive tests. A non-destructive test is a test that you can carry out the test and generate a result without destroying your structural elements. Whereas a destructive test is a test that you cannot generate a result of your test without destroying your elements. An example is the compressive strength test of a concrete using crushing method. If you want to use a crushing method to determine your compressive strength of your concrete, you will need to take your concrete to the laboratory to crush a sample. So it is the sample that you have to crush, not the real material you need. So after carrying out this test on each piles, what will happen if the piles or some piles fail the test? There are 2 solutions to this. 1, The failed piles can be reconstructed. You will reconstruct the piles that fail. Number 2, a raft foundation can be constructed over the pile foundation. You will construct a raft foundation on that pile foundation. And this type of foundation is called piled raft foundation.
Thanks for watching to the end. Please like, subscribe, comment and share this video if you like it. Thank you and goodbye.